One of the things I noticed a lot that a lot of players do in different card games. I was just watching a video about Yu-Gi-Oh! And what was funny was the idea of the players talking about instead of like constantly changing their decks um, right before an event, instead of just playing with what they had originally. Um, and I was thinking about like that's just bad deck building etiquette. Um, it's like if you build a deck to work a certain way and it works, then the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the fact that people are trying to fix something that was working for them during play testing, and if they play, let's say they play tested for like 2 weeks straight, if that specific build prior to an event was working for those 2 weeks, it makes no sense to change it. So the only reason you're changing it is because your mindset is, well, I heard some people are taking this deck and taking that deck. I'm hearing that aggro is going to be popular at the event. So I need more anti-aggro cards, right? Or I need specific cards, like maybe more floodgates or something like that. So when you start having that mindset, then you want to change your deck, even though your deck was working just fine prior to the event. Now you want to change it just because you heard of some extra information. This extra detail is now making you want to change up your deck, right? And for me, well, that's definitely a bad idea. Because one, you should be building your deck to be evergreen, right? To always be good, no matter what. Regardless of what everybody else is doing, your deck should be good regardless. Because your deck should be built to win the game, not, to counter, so to speak, right? Everybody else's strategy, what everybody else is doing, right? It's kind of like a foot race, right? You just want to be faster than everybody else so you can win the race. It makes no sense for you to, try to find a way to like, oh, I know this person's scared of spiders, so I have a spider, mask on or something. I don't know. I'll wear a Spider-Man costume, and maybe that'll scare them and make it hard for them to run, so I could beat them in the foot race, right? That kind of nonsense. And it's like, why are you trying to use something specifically to give you an advantage to help you, try to win? I mean, I'm assuming the reason you're putting cards in your deck and you're changing up your deck strategy is because you're trying to win, right? But why are you changing it up based off of what everybody else is doing when you should just make sure your deck is designed to win and then play it to win? That's what I do, right? If I have a turn 2 kill or turn 3 or something like that, or if I have a turn 5 win con, then that's all I got to do. Get to turn 5, play my win con, and win the game. I don't need to do anything extra. I don't need to, look around and be like, oh, everybody's playing, let's see, what kind of, I don't need to look around and be like, oh, everybody's playing like hand control or something like that. And then now I'm like, okay, I need cards specifically to help me against hand control. It's like, no, you don't. All you need to do is make sure you draw a lot of cards, right? You draw more cards than they can rip out of your hand, and then play your win con. And hopefully, if you play your cards right, they don't hit your win con, and then you manage to play your win con, and you win because you played your win con. Let's say, use Turn Tide. I always use that as an example a lot, because most people know what Turn Tide does, and they know that's literally a 1-card win con in the right condition. You don't even have to be that good at the game in order to win with it, right? That's the idea. So all you do is just get your opponent life low enough just to play the card. And as long as you play the card, you're pretty much going to win. Now, it's not a 100% win condition win con, right? I'll say it's a 90% chance of winning with the card, but 90% is way better than a 20% win con, right? 20% chance of winning through a win, through luck or through some other method, or through try to play a floodgate and hoping you win that way, right? This is a pretty decent card, Pepperoni. I'm looking into this card. I'm like, ooh, this has some potential. This definitely an evergreen card right here, because you can see once per turn when your opponent activates a counter skill, draw a card. That means when they play counter, when they play counterattacks, obviously, right? Especially if you're going up against a deck that counterplays heavily, like counterattacks heavily, then you'll take advantage of that, right? So this could be good as a counter to Hatchiyack. In case you're playing a Hatchiyack deck, you can have this as a counter to it, right, so to speak. I mean, this is just a good card in general because the likelihood of someone playing like counter skill, like a counterattack or a counterplay, like Gasoline Trunks or something like that, is pretty high. So you would get a draw out of this. So you can at least get one card out of this, maybe two cards out of this. So it's not that bad. And the fact that it's, a 2-drop, 15K, that means it has potential. That means you could put it in a Shenron, right, and bring it out with assembling the squad. You can bring it out from the drop with the effect of Shenron Figure Majesty. Obviously, you could just play this on your turn too. There's probably a couple other cards out there that could play out a 2-drop card, or at least a card with 15K power, like Chain Attack Trunks or some shit like that. Point is, it wouldn't be that hard to get this card on the field. And of course, if you have more than one copy on the field, you'll be able to get the effects to trigger off multiple times and get a whole bunch of plussing. So it has some potential. For draw power purposes, this wouldn't be too bad to use in a Shenron deck. But anyway, just point out this has some potential, something I'm looking into. It's like an evergreen card. See, this negates an attack. It's a 2-drop, but it's not something I'm recommending. This has a little bit of potential, right? If your leader card is black, so if you're playing Hatchiyack or something like that, you have 2 or less cards in your hand, your opponent can't activate counterplay skills. Now, I wish this said counter skills. We know what we would have done with this if this said counter skill, but it says counterplay. I mean, ideally, what I really want is for it to say counter. Well, ideally counters skills, period. But I would have taken counter attack. Counterplay is like meh. I don't worry about counterplays as much, unless it's like Gasoline Trunks or something. So I'm looking at this as the potential of like, oh, this could potentially be useful for playing like a counter to Gasoline Trunks, Charismatic Frieza, things of that nature. Because the idea is that you'll play this first and then you'll try to play like a win con. Let's say you have a win con that doesn't have deflect, then this will technically give you deflect. So I'm looking into something like this. And this has barriers, so it's nice. So it's a 15K 2-drop barrier. So just alone, the fact that it's a generic, right, 2 energy 15K barrier, it's good in general. Obviously with a black leader it's better because it has the permanent, which is nice. An extra cool thing about this is this does have some use in case you try to drop Oceanus on your opponent, because I had a scenario happen like that where I tried to drop Oceanus on my opponent and they had like a counter play battle card that allowed them to hit my Oceanus just because of my Oceanus costing me 2, but I personally don't believe it should work. But as far as I can tell so far from my little Google search is that it does work, or at least somebody online said it does, so I'll go with that. And if that's the case, knowledge is power, right? The more you know, the better, right? Knowing is half the battle. But that being said, is like this could help me protect my Oceanus, right? From getting hit, because Oceanus, you play it, you pitch a card, that kind of stuff. So your hand size could get small. So it just has some potential. Like this could literally, in the right condition, just hurt your opponent. Because all you have to do is just have 2 cards less, left in your hand, right? So 2 or less cards in your hand, and then bang, this triggers. Obviously, this would be much better if it was, if it always worked. If it wasn't, you had to have 2 or less. But this is, where skill comes in, right? This is where knowledge and experience comes in. Your ability to plan ahead and make it work. See, if it was generic, right, most people would play it. If it was just counterplay, period, regardless of your hand size, tons of people will be using it right now. But the fact that it is 2 or less, obviously a lot of people are not going to use it. But this is where being unique comes in, where the whole like, well, I'll give it a try. It definitely has potential in like an aggro build because of the fact that you use up your hand so much, and if you play a whole bunch of cards for your hands real quick, this has potential in that regards. Another thing this might be useful for is a deck where deliberately you reduce your hand size. Because I forgot, I think it's the Bobby leader, it's the black Bobby leader, where you draw 5 cards once you have no cards in your hands or some shit like that. So you could deliberately use up your hand with that leader, right? And have this as part of your deck strategy. That way when you try to play certain strategy, like maybe some type of chain, like a boo chain or something, right? Do the boo chain in the Bobby deck, and it'll be hard for your opponent to counterplay because you literally have 2 or less cards in your hand, so they can't counterplay you. So now you can just go up the chain, unimpeded, right? Unstopped. Suspect. Unstopped. And then use the leader's ability to just draw a whole bunch of cards afterwards. So like you can deliberately reduce your hand size just so you can make sure this card is active, play your stuff, and then refill your hand afterwards, after you already play what you want. Because remember, you only need this ability when you're trying to play something that might not have deflect. So it's kind of like a way of giving something deflect. So it's just something to consider. And like I said, most people wouldn't consider a card like this because of the whole 2 cards or less condition, and also the whole black leader thing. So some people might not consider this just because it's not easy to use, as it were. You can't just play it and it automatically will work. You have to make it work, and most people don't like to make things work. They just want it to automatically work, which I understand. Fair enough. You want things to work. I understand. But, there is something to be said about making things work. And that's something I definitely do a lot. I take stuff and make it work. I make stuff do what it normally don't do. Just like using this as a form of counter basically. I'm using another card, a card that says, hey, when your opponent plays a counter attack, deal them 1 damage, right? Like in my Death and Tactics strategy. Then that kind of works like counter, right? Because the whole purpose of counter is just basically to say no to when your opponent plays a counter attack, right? But another way of saying no is not letting them play in the first place, or make them second guess playing it or double thinking it, right? If the end goal is for your opponent not to play a counter attack, that's what I'm trying to say. So anything you can do to put them in a position where they don't play the counter attack, it's similar to counter, because the end result, right? It's not the method or the journey, it's the end result, right? It's the what's the term for it? But you get the point. It's the results. It's the results that I'm looking for, right? As long as the result is my opponent does not counter my game-winning attack, that way we can't get to the combo step and I shotgun, right? Drop my whole hand into the attack and go for game, then that's all I care about. But definitely look at a lot of old black cards, see if there's any good old evergreen cards, right? Cards that you could use as a side deck card, main deck, have it as a spice. For some reason this thing's not loading up like it normally would. I think it's because I don't get much of a reception down here on the interwebs. So I'm trying to find some cards. Auto, once per turn, when you play a battle card using overwhelm, draw 1 card, then place up to 3 black battle cards from your weapon to drop it. See, this is the good card. Gotta keep this in mind. Screenshot it right quick. Post that to the hat chat group. Obviously this is meant to be used as a promo card. It's meant to be used, as a part of a overwhelm strategy. But that's the thing, is that if you play some overwhelms in your deck, in your hat check deck, this is a good way of doing it. So what I'm trying to say is, what you want to do with this card, right? Especially if you're playing like hat check or something like that, you want to play overall overwhelm 3 battle cards, right? Battle cards that have overwhelm 3. That way you can overwhelm, right? Overwhelm 3 cards. Use this card's effect to draw a card and then put those cards back. Ideally, you want 3 black battle cards in your, in your drop when you overwhelm, so that way they get warped and you put them back, right? So that way you can infinitely afford the ability to overwhelm every turn, that kind of stuff. This is something I would like to use in my, just thinking about it, I would like to use this in my Bardic deck, because Bardic bursts 3, and I do have a lot of 3-drop overwhelms. So the whole idea is just to guarantee that I could always overwhelm, or essentially free play something every turn. So that's what I do. I tend to play a lot of overwhelm 3, overwhelm 2 cards in my Bardic deck. So this will be a great card to put in there, because it will help me guarantee that I can always afford the overwhelm 3. Plus, I don't have to keep bursting 3 cards from my leader to guarantee I have 3 cards in the drop in order to overwhelm 3. So this is a way to prevent me from decking myself out, right? So this is the kind of thought process I have when it comes to certain cards. Some people would easily overlook this card and not even consider it. But if you really look closely, it's like, this has potential. This can make it where I can play, some overwhelm cards, every turn relatively for free. I don't have to set up my graveyard to play the cards, because this will automatically guarantee that whatever I overwhelm, I put it right back. So I overwhelm and then put it back in my drop. Overwhelm, put it back in my drop. And I'm getting a +1 out of it, which means I'm always replacing the card in my hand. Now, what's ironic, I'm definitely going to look into this, because this will be a nice little loop. There is some overwhelm cards that you can overwhelm, and they grab something out of the warp and add to the hand. So you can kind of essentially infinitely, you could loop them. You use 2 copies of the same overwhelm card and just loop them over and over again. So I'm gonna look into something like that. Especially if I combine this with my Bardic, because of the fact I can guarantee bursting 3, and because what I'm thinking of is there's a overwhelm 6, so I can loop. I think there's a Goku overwhelm 6. Yeah, of course, it's all beyond powers, or all beyond powers, something like that. Beyond powers, something like that. Beyond limits, I think it's beyond limits, something like that. Goku, and he's overwhelm 6, and I could always grab a copy of him, right? So then all I have to do is use this to put 3 battle cards back, use my leader to burst 3, that way I can always afford 6, and just keep looping that Goku over and over again, and have a 30k beater that I can play for free every turn. So see the potential, and then of course I'm always plussing a card every turn as part of the process. So definitely something to look into. But that's what I'm saying about evergreen. There, even something like this, because even I have a playset of this, and I haven't, played with this in a long time. Hopefully she loads up. See, this is a block of revenge, but it has counterplay. Choose 2 cards in your drop area and send it to the warp in order to play, right? So you pay 2 to play her, obviously. Pay 2, warp 2, drop her, right? And then she's block of revenge. This is a really good evergreen card. This is a good card in general, because all you need is 2 energy, right? At least 2 cards in your drop for it, right? Minimum of 2 cards to be able to play this, because you have to warp 2. And then anytime your opponent tries to drop a so this is at least a good side deck card, right? Tries to drop, something really problematic, like a Cell Zeno or something, a finisher or something that could try to end you out. I mean, this, a Perfect Force Cell. No, I said Perfect Force Cell. Well, yeah, Perfect Force Up. I meant to say Android 17 Turn of Tides or something like that, and you could drop this bad girl, right? Pay 2, warp 2, bang, drop it. Now, she's in play. Yeah, you lose your hand, whatever, but at least now she's in play. So if they try to attack, bang, block, revenge. That way, not only do you defend, you're also getting rid of whatever the threat is. So even if it's something that has deflect, this is something that can get around deflect. So like I said, this is an evergreen, type card, because you can put her in any deck and she's always good. So you can have it as a side deck card, as a main deck card, however way you want to roll. So this wouldn't be a bad side deck card, at least for a Hatchiac deck, right? Because this definitely would be useful. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation. I was gonna say this would definitely be useful against the 8-drop. What's his name? But that'd be incorrect, because of course once it attacks, it could warp this, so it'd be bad in that situation. But this should be good at least against a 10-drop. Maybe a couple other potential battle cards that Hatchiac players use. You can use this against them. But the point is that it's a good card that definitely can put in work in certain situations. The fact that you can put a blocker, period, just for 2 energy on your opponent's turn as a counterplay. So remember that it's counterplay timing. So if your opponent's like, all right, pay 5 for my 5-drop so I can go for game, and it's like, all right, boom, pay 2, drop her, and now you can defend against that card. So it's definitely something to look into. And the list goes on. There's tons of other stuff, you can look into that potential. So I'll be looking at some obscure cards to see if there's any cards that, have some potential use. I don't know, it's taking long to load. There's some cards that you normally would overlook. Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to load that right now. That sucks. I'm curious what that card does. Oh, there we go. Permanent, this card gets 5k power for each card placed under it. Auto, when this card attacks, choose 2 cards in your hand and place them under this card. Auto, at the start of your main phase, if there are 4 or more cards under this card, place this card into its drop area. Okay, so when this card attacks, choose 2 cards in your hand and place it under this card. I wish it did the top 2 cards of your deck instead. I don't want to give up card advantage for that, but for each card under, it gets 5k. So you can make it a 20k by putting 2 cards under it. Okay, let me put it this way. At first, it doesn't seem like a great card, because it's like, okay, it could be a 20k 2-drop, but now I'm losing 3 cards because I have to play this card, swing with it, and then lose 2 more cards from my hand. So it's a commitment of 3 cards just for a 2-drop 20k. When I could probably play a 2-drop 15k or something else like a 2-drop unison instead, right? Which will give me which will give me hand advantage by drawing a card, right? Than playing something like this. But what you have to look at is the fact that it says when it attacks, you put 2 cards under it. There's very few cards that have the effect of putting cards under cards. And there's some cards out there that says if you remove a card from under a card, you get something. So this is something to look at the possibility of being good later on, where more cards that says, take a card from under a battle card and do something. Then this will be something you want to look into, because that's potential, right? Let's say there's a card that says, while this card is under a battle card, the battle card gets an effect. This will be a card that automatically can benefit from that. So imagine that. At some point, they're going to make some battle cards that, when they're under a battle card, they'll give their effects, or they'll give a effect to the battle card that's on top. And this would definitely be something that can take advantage of that. And the fact that it could do 2 cards, so you can give it, maybe, dual attack, double strike, or crit and double strike, or give it a triple strike and crit, like triple strike crit, or dual attack crit, triple strike. You get the idea. It could just, it could be you could give it blocker and revenge, or just give it revenge and double strike, right? So that way you can deal damage, but if your opponent tries to take it down, at least it has revenge, so it can kill something in the process. You get the idea. So that's all I'm saying, is I'm just trying to put it out there. Make sure that you're using, when you put cards in your deck, that they're always good against any against any deck, any matchup. Don't have cards specifically for just one matchup. Like, oh, these cards are only good against hand control, but then they're useless against every other deck. Try to find stuff that's good in general, that can be used against hand control, can be used against aggro, can be used against control decks, and the list goes on, right? I'm always looking for stuff that's just generically good, that no matter what strategy I'm going up against, whether it's mill, hand control, burn, aggro, right? You know, whatever. Token spam, whatever, right? Whatever I'm going up against, the cards I have some type of use, some shape, way, or form. I'm going to be able to find some way of using them to combat. You know what I mean? Some people probably never thought of using the 4-star ball in their hat check deck as anti-hand control, or even use it, because some people even point out to me like, oh, I never thought of that, using the 4-star ball as something to discard for like Oceanus or Power of the People, Protector of the People, and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that's the point. You can always add it back to your hand, so why wouldn't you use it for effects that require you to discard? Or use it, as reusable combo power, like I use it, obviously, right? Or use it as anti-hand control. If your opponent has the ability to make you discard 2 cards per turn from your hand, well, one of them will be the 4-star ball, and the other one will be a card you have no problem discarding. Because maybe you have extra copies of that card in your hand, so you don't care if you lose one. But you don't want to keep losing a whole bunch of cards, right? You want to the idea is to slow down the bleeding, not necessarily stop the bleeding, right? But at least slow it down. So that's what I tend to do. I tend to try to slow down my opponent's hand control strategy, as opposed to just flat out try to stop them. Because I'm more likely to be able to set up a slowing down my opponent's hand control strategy with whatever cards I draw from my deck, than if I was trying to draw a specific card to specifically help me against hand control. So I'd rather use generic cards that are evergreen, cards that work in general, that I use to do whatever I want. But when I go up against hand control, it has some use against hand control. I've mentioned this before in some other videos where I have unisons that pretty much all the unisons have draw effects, among other, utility effects, but they have draw effects. So if I ever need to draw cards against hand control, well, they have draw effects. So I'll use the draw effects to draw to help me counter, well, not counter, but at least slow the bleeding or slow the hand control player, right? By drawing with the leader, drawing with the unison, drawing with maybe a battle card, or playing cards that even if my opponent discards them, I don't care, because they have graveyard effects, right? They have drop area effects. And that'll be the end of the video.